Um, Jana, you're an expert in dysphagia, and I suspect you've been studying it for a number of years. Could you tell us a bit about the condition, such as maybe who gets it, and what are the challenges faced by individuals with dysphagia?
Yeah, for sure. And I know that I'm surprising you here with a few slides, but I just thought it's easier sometimes to show that. And so, in anticipation of you asking this question, I'll tell you a little bit about dysphagia. So, when I started my career at the university, I was affiliated with an institute called the Institute for Reconstructive Sciences and Medicine, and I'm currently their director of research. And also, as you mentioned, Keith, I'm in the Faculty of Rehabilitation Medicine. And my background was in speech language pathology. And when I finished my PhD and I started research at the university, I was also cross-appointed at the institute, and the population of people that I was working with, the clinical group, was patients with head and neck cancer. And one of the things that I mean, it was hard to miss, was that after they went through all this treatment and they were cured for the cancer, they ended up with this problem called dysphagia. And that basically means a problem with swallowing. And so it was really devastating to their lives. It basically, not only did it affect their nutrition and everything, but as you can see in this picture, when you think about eating, it's so much more than just survival. It's about how we socialize with each other and connect. And it's just that sheer pleasure in life. So, having that taken away was really one of the biggest problems that these patients were facing. Now, it's not only patients with head and neck cancer. So we know that around the world, there's about 500 million people who are dealing with this problem. And the reason that number is so high is because it's associated with some really common medical conditions like stroke, Parkinson's disease, traumatic brain injury, and as well cancer. And so what ends up happening is that the mechanism for swallowing doesn't work properly. Unfortunately, the thing that is closest to the swallowing mechanism is our breathing mechanism. And so when someone has dysphagia, one of the biggest risks is that they will choke on their food, they'll have food going into their lungs, and they can get very sick or die from this. So it's really a big problem for patients who have it. And it's also a socialization, it impedes socialization. So, if you can imagine, if you're having difficulty eating and you're coughing and you're choking on every bite, you're going to be the center of attention at a meal, but for all the wrong reasons. And so what ends up happening is that people really just stop socializing, and their quality of life becomes really poor.
Okay, so this is very clearly a serious issue for many people. And to help these individuals who have dysphagia, you and your team developed the mobility device and the app that goes with it, which is another very important component. So can you tell me a bit about the mobility device and app, maybe like how they're used and what it really does for someone with dysphagia?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things when I was working with patients who had head and neck cancer, what I knew was that there was this treatment that I had in the clinic. This was the machine at the lab at the institute. And essentially, if I could get them to come in to the clinic, get hooked up to this machine so they could see what their muscles were doing, because our understanding what your swallowing muscles are doing is not intuitive at all, because it's something we just do naturally. So trying to teach rehabilitation of those muscles is tough, but with biofeedback, and when you can see what your muscles are doing, it makes a lot of sense. The problem is it has to be intensive. And so people would have to come into the clinic every single day. And I'd started a clinical trial to test this intensive therapy idea. I had to close the trial because just nobody could make it in every single day for weeks on end. And, you mentioned something at the beginning. You said that I was the brainchild behind this. And really, it was a team effort. around the development of this idea. So in this lab, I had hired a young clinician named Gabriela Constantinescu. And so she was treating patients as well. And, she looked at this big machine. And the other thing I loved about the Institute was that we always had biomedical engineers who were employed as part of the Institute. And that was because we really believed in the intersection of technology with medicine. And it's hard to intersect those two things if you don't have specialists in the engineering area. So Gabby went to Dylan Scott, who was the biomedical engineer, and said, can you do something with this big machine? Like, can you make it smaller? And that discussion, yeah, I know engineers love those kind of questions, right? So that discussion between those two, they came to me and said, hey, what can we do around this? How can we make this happen? That's what started it. And then I started down the road of all the fun that researchers know that exist out there, which is, how do we fund this? Like, we have this idea, but how do we get it started? And so we had gone to a couple different agencies. The one that funded us was the Alberta Cancer Foundation, and it was major funding. It was over $1.9 million across 5 years. And if we wouldn't have had that, this would not have happened, because in order to take this idea, you really need to have a team around this development. So whether that's you as a researcher in your lab doing it, or you intersecting with some of these other groups that I know are going to be speaking today, you have to somehow have that around that idea, I believe. So
Absolutely. So then, based on that funding, your goal was to create a marketable device right from the get-go, or was it still at the research stage then? Like, did it evolve and then you had a cut point? It's like, now we have something, we're good to go. Was there that type of realization?
Yeah, that's a great question. We were taking essentially a known technology, a known treatment. So it wasn't like we were creating EMG, which is the base technology here. We were taking that and we were making it different. And so as researchers, I'll be honest, we initially started out like, hey, this is research. The application that went into the Alberta Cancer Foundation, of course, they wanted, at the end of the application, you had to talk about how you were going to translate knowledge and commercialize. And so commercialization at that point was like, so really what we said there was, we'll license this technology to somebody who wants it, because that was at that point what we had heard and what we knew. That changed as we went along. And so just on this slide here, you can see the evolution of what we did with the team, going from, this big machine here, some benchtop PCBs that we were working on. This was our first idea. When I look at it now, it's kind of funny. And again, this was one of the moments with engineers where I was like, can't you get rid of the wire? And they're like, well, the battery and all the guts have to be somewhere. I'm like, well, why can't that all be one? And it's like the story of where you say to an engineer, can't you turn that red line blue? And they say no, because it's a red line. But we had Dylan Scott was the lead on this, and he's genius when it comes to this kind of stuff. So we went from that to, this was the device that we tested, that you see here on the woman looking at her phone. It was big, it was bigger, but at least smaller than this big machine. It was clunky. But what we could do with that was that we could prove people could take it home, they could use it. And we ended up here. This is the end point where we are with the device, where there's an app, and as well as the device that has all the guts and everything in it, no wires, sitting under the chin.
So there were definitely several proof of principles levels going forward, just to, like, at the level of, is this going to be beneficial, like from a therapeutic level, and also from the device level.
For sure. And we were pretty convinced that this will be beneficial at the therapeutic level. That foundational information existed in the literature. It was just how can we make this functional and usable for people in their homes? And that had never been done before. Uh,
So was there a clear trigger point at when you decided, like you said, you'd started exploring licensing and then the spin-off and whatnot. What was the trigger that said, you know what, this is okay, this is no longer at the level of research. We have to take this. Was there like a defined moment, or was it a kind of an evolution, a slow evolution in that regard?
for me, there was a real defined moment, and that was when I realized that some of the things that we wanted that were more commercial in nature, and that specifically were patents, we wanted to protect the patents that we had filed. Nobody would pay for them. So the Alberta Cancer
Yeah.
Foundation, research, they don't want to pay for patent protection. And so it either was going to come out of our pocket, or we had to find out what else existed out there. And that really was the impetus for starting to think about commercialization.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you already talked about, you kind of explored the licensing idea. And then you, uh, but you ultimately decided to go with the spin-off. What did you learn from trying to go down that licensing route in terms of, it didn't end up being a viable option in the end, obviously, because you started the spin-off. Can you tell us about that a little bit? Why you chose the spin-off then?
Yeah, I mean, we started looking at some license options with bigger industry partners, and I think for our particular space, it wasn't something that was going to get a lot of traction quickly. And the other thing is that really we are the experts in it. The team that we put around this are the experts in this. And
Mm-hmm.
we had the drive and the determination to say, we want to do this. We're really excited about it. And that was the trigger for changing our direction on this. It was like, no, we're going to do this. Um, it just makes sense. So
Absolutely. It comes down to a gut feeling then,
yeah.
in some ways, which is hard to explain. So this is a medical device, and from the best of my knowledge, I believe that probably for most medical devices, the hardest element of getting something to market is the approval process. Now, did the mobility device and app need approval, and what was that? Um, can you tell us a bit more about that?
For sure. That has been huge. It's been a really big thing that we've had to wrap our heads around and understand. And one of the things where we started exploring this was we were part of the Creative Destruction Lab Accelerator program. And as well as the Matter Accelerator in Chicago. So yay to accelerators. I think they're really important. They get you connected with people who've been there, people who've run businesses. And so really important. And it was life-changing or business changing for us, because we had guidance on, hey, here are all the things that you haven't thought about. So we knew there was regulatory. We had filed an ITA with Health Canada when we wanted to do our feasibility study, but it's a whole different thing when you're a company and you want to be out there. So one of the things that was critical, expensive, but critical, was to hire a regulatory consultant who had been there and to help us navigate this. And one of the things that we learned through that consultant was that there was a pathway through the FDA for low risk devices, and that's a wellness pathway. And as long as you fit within certain guidelines that the FDA has put out within that pathway, and you have to be very careful about your claims and what you are saying. So right now, we don't call ourselves a medical device. We are a wellness device. We are abiding by the guidelines in that FDA document so that we can be that way. And that is how we were able to launch in the United States, which has been critical as well for learning about this in the real world. Now, we are still on a path to uh, for medical device registration, which opens up some other things for us and opens up some other things in the technology. Um, so that's on the pathway. Health Canada is a little different. They don't have a particular low risk wellness device pathway. Um, and so for those of you who are creating things and thinking about doing this, one of the most important things that you're going to have in place, I guess, depending on your classification of device, we're a class 2 device. We need to have a quality management system in place. And so I would say start this sooner rather than later. Get your documentation into place, because if the way things happen in a lab with documentation is different than the way things have to happen through a quality management system. So it's something to consider early on so that you don't have to go back or recreate things that you've already done. And it's
Did you?
really important for regulatory, both FDA and Health Canada.
Absolutely. So, did you have to did you work with a company then for that, like the documentation side also? Did you work with someone who would help you get that documentation in order as like or like even keep track of it as a third party, or are you doing this all internally within your own company now?
Both. So again, we looked at different options, consultants who could do this for us. We had all grown up in the Institute, and the Institute years ago was ISO certified as a healthcare facility. So we had that quality understanding. But again, when you're implementing something like that yourself, it's a different story. What we decided was to use a cloud-based service called Greenlight Guru, and it allows you to create your whole quality system on an online platform. They also have experts who can help you based on your needs to get that implemented. And right now we're going through having an external party come in to do a gap analysis for us. So that's how we've managed up to this point.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question beyond the question, one more question, and then I'll open the floor. And it comes down to manufacturing. Are you doing this locally, or have you outsourced this? And did you consider either or, like overseas manufacturing and whatnot, in terms of quality control and cost and all that?
Yeah. So our decision was to stay on North American soil for any kind of manufacturing. We made that decision prior to COVID happening, and afterwards, we were very happy that we made that decision just from a supply chain standpoint. What we're doing is we're getting different parts manufactured in different places, and then we're having everything brought to Edmonton, and we're assembling here. Now,
Mm,
this is part of our plan. It was done intentionally that way so that we could look at what it's like to put these devices together. Where might a contract manufacturer run into problems? What might we have to adjust, so they don't put the PCB in upside down and then send out 100 non-functioning devices or what have you. So it's been really revealing to do the assembly here, the assembly and the testing here. And the idea is, of course, as we scale, we will use a contract manufacturer who would do it from beginning to end for us.
excellent. I think I've asked enough questions, so we can open the floor. Thank you very much, Jana, for that. And we're going to open the floor now to questions. So I see that there's one question in the chat. It's a very scientific question, but I'm sure we'll get some more based on the business side of things also. And this one's from Marilee Stevens. And she's asking, hold on, as my chat scrolls, um, is dysphagia more of a defect in the swallowing center in the medulla, or due to paresis of the musculature? And I guess following up on that, or something else?
Sure. Thanks for your question, Mary Lee. It can be both of those, all of those. So it can, if it's stroke or traumatic brain or neurologically related, it's a brain issue. And if it's something like cancer, where there's been surgery and radiation therapy, it's a peripheral issue where the muscles are affected. Um, Whatever, and this is why I'm such a firm believer in intensive exercise that actually uses a swallow. So there are other things out there where, you know, you can stimulate muscles and you don't really have to engage your own brain to do that. But um, my belief is that it's really important to get everything going from the start to the finish of a swallow. And there's, you know, 30 different pairs of muscles that are involved. And so it's retraining a whole behavior so that whether it's a neurological problem or a peripheral muscular problem, you're hitting it.
Can I ask a quick follow-up thing, Keith?
Sure, go ahead.
No, so the reason I asked, I know it's science-based, but I was wondering if you could take your technology and apply it to different problems around the jaw. And I have what's called a lazy tongue. I had to do a speech path whole thing when I was a kid. So I'm just curious if you can, because the swallowing is a very complex process. And I'm just wondering if you can take this technology and then apply it to different conditions around the mouth, or is it very specific to swallowing? That's why I asked the question, because that would broaden your business base, I guess you could say.
For sure. And this is where we have to be very careful about the claims that we make. So I'll tell you some anecdotes from patients who have used this, who have trouble with both speech and swallowing because it's the same muscles doing different things. And so we've had patients say that going through this intensive exercise also helped their speech. It's helped some patients sing again. We know that when you're measuring what's happening here, you can also pick up movements that are created by the tongue, not necessarily just the swallow. So, and that was part of our software development, was to create an algorithm that could detect the difference between those types of movements. So I would never claim that it could help that type of thing, but we have had anecdotal references, and any muscular movement, essentially, it can pick up anywhere in the body. So.
We have another question, but before we go to the next question, I'm wondering, we didn't get to the video. I'm wondering if you could show the video, share your screen again, and just quickly show that. I think people will get a really good sense of
Sure.
how that works.
Sure.
It's only a couple minutes, so.
Mobility is a mobile swallowing exercise system designed to improve the well-being of individuals affected by swallowing disorders. It is composed of a small wireless device placed under your chin and an app that provides visual biofeedback. So as you exercise, you see your swallowing muscles in real time. This is accomplished using surface electromyography, or SEMG, which is a clinically established technology that measures your muscle activity. Mobility is small and portable. The carrying case charges your device when you aren't using it. That means you can do swallowing exercises wherever and whenever works for you. The app allows you to track your progress and challenge yourself to improve. Your activities are shared automatically with your clinician to ensure meaningful insights are captured and adjustments to your exercises can be made. Behind Mobility is a team of clinicians and researchers dedicated to improving the experiences of people with swallowing disorders. Mobility is backed by years of research with patient and clinician input. Mobility provides you with personal health insights and meaningful connection with your clinician through smarter technology.
For patients that have dysphagia, they're living through the same experience that I've lived through, which is the inability to swallow and the embarrassment of coughing and choking and not being able to speak properly. I know from experience how much it helped me. Having mobility and being able to use it on my timeline is a very, very important part of the entire rehabilitation. For me, it was inconvenient to have to drive for half an hour to get to the clinic where they had one of these refrigerator-sized machines, as compared to having a device that is on my desk and I can put on my chin. One of the beautiful things about mobility is you can do the exercises anywhere with the device. Whether you choose to do it at home, do it at the office, or at a coffee shop is completely up to you.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. I will go on to the next question then. This one's from Vivian Mushwar. Very exciting work, Jana. Looking back, what do you wish you'd known, or what resources do you wish you had at an earlier stage?
I would say that the resources at an earlier stage for people who are thinking about this kind of stuff are the business resources that can help you understand, first of all, what is really the market for this. We all think our inventions are the best thing out there and they're going to be bought by millions of people. So, but what really is the market? I think that is so important. And as well, you know, what are the funding opportunities for this? So we were fortunate to become part of the Creative Destruction Lab, where that opened this up for us. We had never talked to investors before. We had talked to funders, tri-council, et cetera. So I think that would be one of the most important things, is just understanding the market, the business side of things, and how realistic your idea is before you put too much effort into getting there.
Excellent. And now we have a question from Greg Hallahan. Great work, Jana. How would you compare the challenges of demonstrating the device works and is safe, i.e. like the technical feasibility, and demonstrating it can be profitable, market feasibility?
Yep, definitely. I would say, you know, they both have their own challenges. We've gone through consumer electronic testing. For us, getting that in order, it's expensive. Now going through it for medical devices is another level, but and complicated, but it can be done with the right money. The market, on the other hand, and actually getting traction, that is a whole new world. Even as clinicians, and when we were developing the device, we had clinicians and patients involved. So, you know, we really had insights into that market. But the actual market, when you're out on it and you're looking at how do I get traction, like it right now, we're educating clinicians that they actually can have this kind of technology, because prior those big machines were $30,000, and so no clinicians were using it. So now we have this, I would call it extra job, to educate our market. And once they hear about it, it's like, oh, that's cool. But then it still takes a few more touch points before they're going to buy it. So yeah, market is challenging, but it's great and it's fun, and we're learning so much from being in market and talking to customers. So
okay, and I think we have time for one more question. This one's from Michelle Whaling. With regard, oh, hold on, scrolling is happening and moving the question. There we go. In regards to the quality management services, pardon me, quality management system, what were some of the challenges you faced when implementing this in particular?
I'd say the biggest challenge has been who is going to do the work, because a lot of it is very technical. And that meant that, and a lot of that technical information was in Dylan's brain. And so really a lot of it was, he had to do it. And that's not necessarily the best use of Dylan's time. So I would say that has been the most challenging part of setting up the system. Has just been the time sink that it takes to get it in. And that's why, you know, if there's a way that you can do it as you're developing and have that culture within your research development team, it's a good thing to do. And I'm listening to myself say this, but it's also not cheap either. So it's a fairly expensive undertaking. And so you kind of want to be certain that you're really pushing ahead with the idea.